Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's panel. We're calling it Security Theater or Real Defense, Navigating Open Source Security in a Cloud-Native World. My name is Oshrat, and I'll be the moderator today. I do product marketing at Middlebear for Miradi, and I've spent the last 7 years in the cloud-native ecosystem, including as a contributor to Kubescape. We've got an incredible lineup of panelists for you today, and we'll be diving into real-world stories, practical strategies, and a few spicy takes. At the end of these 30 minutes, I hope you'll be able to tell the difference between what's actually working and what's just performative security theater, and advocate for the former. So, ladies, please introduce yourselves and share why you think security has become performance theater versus real defense. Rotem, can you start, please?
Yeah. Hi, nice meeting you. I'm Rotem Refael. I'm the VP R&D of ARMO, also a maintainer of Kubescape from the day began. So practically, Kubescape began with compliance, right? So, ticking the box, having everything in line, whatever big companies like. But now, actually, we're more focusing on runtime and real defense in real time and in your cluster. So, having just a compliance seems like a real theater rather than knowing what's really attacking your cluster, which is the real defense. So that's my take for that.
Constance?
Yeah, and I'm going to go. So my name's Constanze. I'm originally a theoretical physicist, actually, but spent several years in the financial services and regulated sectors, and recently turned entrepreneur, actually, because one of the things that was really aggravating me was the wasted money because of fear-based sales and security. And the thing that I love is to give people confidence in what's actually happening, and this is why I love eBPF, for example, working with all the eBPF tooling as sort of an X-ray scanner of what's really going on. So I both know I can defend against real attacks, but I can also see when vendors say stuff that's snake oil, and that's exactly the theater aspect here. Yeah.
Yeah, Megan?
Yep. Hi, I'm Megan Wolf. So I have spent the last 10 years sort of in the federal space, specifically the defense space for the U.S. government. So I definitely have a slant on what security theater means in that context. I've worked as like a platform engineer, developer tooling, worked on compliance tooling as well. And yeah, really, anybody who's worked with the government understands what like checkbox compliance is and how it's just like, okay, here's your list. We checked it all. We've got approval, and we're moving forward. And here's an artifact that we do nothing with. It just sits in a box somewhere. All the layers of bureaucracy involved. So yeah, it's a journey. There's a lot of really good people in the space trying to push it forward here, CNCF, and yeah, that's me.
And lastly, Stefana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stefana Muller. I'm a vice president of infrastructure at Salesforce. Don't worry, I came from a startup, so I have a full gamut of experience. I was recently acquired by Salesforce from Own Backup, if you know about them. Lots of cheers for them. It's funny, when we're talking about security and theater, I find that there's often a false sense of security constantly amongst the leadership of organizations until something bad happens, and then suddenly it becomes the most highest priority and they just throw everything at it. The other thing that I find that diminishes security, and the ladies on the panel have all said this, but basically I spend so much time meeting compliance standards, especially because I cater to large companies. Of course, I want to check all the boxes. Yes, please give me PCI compliance and ISO and all of the other things, right? By the way, I just went through all my audits, so I'm a little stressed and still trying to decompress. The long story short of that is we checked all the boxes, but I will tell you, I have 100 things I still need to do. And I'm glad that I'm thinking that way, but half of us aren't thinking that way, right? And the thing is, yes, I can check every box, but I'm not going to meet my own personal standards for the security of the environment.
Yeah, okay, so I think what all of these ladies have said, that it's pretty easy to lean into compliance because it lends itself to being measured. You tick a box, you're either compliant, not compliant, and you're good, and you count, and you've got a percentage, and then you pass, and whatever. So that's easy. And the thing is that you get what you measure. And we want security, not compliance. Compliance is a means to an end, right? So ladies, please help me understand how to measure real security so that professionals can actually prove to management that they're doing something and it's valuable, because we know that security people are not loved in organizations, and we know that security only gets some sort of focus when something happens, and people become aware only after a breach has happened. So until that point, it's a hindrance. It's basically a cost center. So Stefana, how would you measure real security and talk to your management about that?
So it's interesting. I don't have a silver bullet. Okay, just to be clear, I haven't fixed this problem. If I had, maybe I would be on my own and having a company like Constanze over there. But I think the key thing that I found is give them real world examples. And one of the things that we've been recently doing that I didn't do before, don't laugh at me, but is red teaming, right? So I find that when you laughed at me. That's not fair. We all said don't laugh at me, but it's very interesting because a lot of companies don't consider it. They're like, okay, let's do a tabletop, and instead of tabletops, we're actually red teaming, right? We're doing the real test. We're going to have an insider who's a threat. We're going to set up an environment where they can actually show me the scope of and the depth of my problem. It's funny because my leadership didn't understand it until they saw the results. We'll talk about results later, right? But they didn't understand the complexity of the security that we needed to apply. So that was one great proof point. That wasn't a statistic, and it wasn't number of CVEs I solved today, right? So that was one thing. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention is that on the alert side, I haven't solved that problem either. So one of the key things, yeah, I'm really honest, okay? But one of the key things is that on the alert side, I have a ton of alerts coming through, and sometimes I just have to assume it's a problem. I have to default to everything's a problem, and then proving it not, because that is the most secure posture, but I'm wasting a ton of time. So there's some solutions to that too. But those are the two things that I think management sees. That's outside of the stats that they make me look at every week on the health review, and then the second health review at the next level, and then the third one at the next. I'm sorry, I'm at a large company, everyone. But this is the number of PowerPoints I have to update to share my CVE count.
Okay, so that sounded painful. Rotem, maybe you can speak to how to tell the difference between false and real positives. Maybe there's a way.
Well, of course, what Stefana said, it's, we all incur that. And practically what matters is to prioritize the things that really matters, right? To know what is false positive and what's not false positive, or even don't see the false positive at all. To have kind of a platform that checks for the anomalies and not just for static rules that everyone are looking at, and then you have tons of info to deal with, but you're not dealing with the right stuff. Eventually you will deal with the wrong stuff and you'll get attacked, right? And then what would you say? Who is responsible for that? So I do think that what really matters is to first prioritize and to know what really matters, right? And if you have kind of a platform that gives you that, I don't want to say Kubescape, but gives you this, this baseline and understanding what are the anomalies based on your behavior, and you don't need to do anything with that. That can really solve your problems in that matter that already Stefana mentioned. So yeah.
Okay, Constance, can you tie that into measurement?
Yeah, so what would be measurable? And I think it's exactly that alert fatigue. Like if I bring it to the blue side from the red side, it's like we are so fatigued at looking at all that CV count and all, like where's the real breach, what really matters? And that means we need how do we interpret all that data is rules typically, right? And you just talked about anomalies. Even an anomaly can be a false positive. So, and I think that means we need to have threat models in the first place to overlay like what part of the rules, the indicators actually matter for me specifically, not just for Kubernetes as a whole, but also for my workload. Am I like defending a database with sensitive data, or am I just running some Lambda that is doing a webhook to somewhere else, right? And so I think the measurable here is how much coverage do I have of the threat model for those rules? And the other thing is how up to date are my rules, and how do I keep the rules up to date? Because it's a real challenge. So that would be the measurable metric, I'd say.
Okay, so that's the security side of thing, but there's actually, you need to execute. So Megan, maybe you can tell us something a little bit from the developer platform engineering standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, you guys are all here. You've seen like the dearth of tools that are available in this space to secure, shift left and shift down, and like the upstream projects, there's like the OpenSSF scorecard, secure container images. There's like the integration, how we secure, the applications, the integration layer with, secure networking, whatever, the, least privilege, zero trust, all of this stuff. And I think it can be overwhelming. It feels overwhelming to me trying to figure out what is actually important to implement. And then I think it's really figuring out the messaging of what is the goal. The goal is to, at the end of the day, to detect and respond to attacks, and what tools you're doing that maps to those specific criteria, essentially. Like I said, I work in a very checkbox industry, but I think we try to think outside the checkbox on those types of things, and we do experience, like we do have, red team activities, and some of the challenges with surfacing that information is that, first of all, it's probably classified. How do we feed that back to the developer teams to actually implement a solution against that? It's a tough problem. Having more maybe automation or just more tooling around surfacing that and like reducing that feedback loop, I think could be really important to really help the space.
Okay, so Megan's talking about government, but I think that we all know that there are organizational challenges or institutional incentives that cause disconnect between security and platform, I guess, where there's no love lost, but it might be because of the setup and not because of the fact that you actually want to achieve the same things, or maybe you should want to achieve the same things. Rotem, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So from my experience, there are two at least type of organization. Stefana can say like 20, but at least two organizations, let's say heads. There is like the security CISO organization, and there is the execution, which is like the DevSecOps, that is really like changing the CVE, patching the images, et cetera, but, the CISO looks and see tons of CVEs, and then the DevSecOps doesn't see the same things, or doesn't think that those are really important to patch for all kind of reasons. Most of them are totally acceptable. So I think that both organizations don't really see the same picture eventually. So the high level and the low level, of course, that's nature, but they don't speak the same language. The CISO don't know what is not the CISO organization, let's say, doesn't know, the patching mechanism, doesn't know what's really vulnerable, what's not really vulnerable. We have 2,000, I don't know how many CVEs in our application or production environment. So the CISO wants you to, completely lost every CV that you have there. On the other hand, none of them are neither critical, exploitable, running really in production, just like, Docker BusyBox that is not exploitable in any other, matter. So, I do think that we need to internal joke, sorry, between, those personas at least, and we need to have kind of a talking the same language, and that will probably, close a bit of this gap. Probably not completely, but that's definitely a start.
Okay, Megan, do you want to talk more about the federal, how it looks from the federal lens?
Yes.
Should I bring you to Kleenex?
Yeah, I mean, the organizational distribution across like who owns the different pieces in the government are just wild. I was actually talking with a coworker yesterday about the selective service, which if you're a male in the US, you probably know what it is. It's like the draft polling. It's not actually part of the DoD. It's like a separate thing. You're like, really? You would think that the draft would actually be part of that system, but it's not. It's just separate. So this is so pervasive across, every system. Like the organization building or acquiring the software, and then you have a separate organization where you're probably deploying like into their enclave, and then you might have another organization that's auditing, and then you've got all of these other stakeholders that, have to care about the security. So there's a lot of disparity there. I mean, how we solve that, short of process and systematic improvements to that, I think exposing artifacts more readily in the things we're deploying. So, what I do is like secure software deployment, like having those artifacts ready to go for the auditors and making it like a lower barrier to communication across all of the organizations, and just having that stuff that is just inherently part of your build system ready to go for them is really maybe a way to kind of fight some of that organizational disparity.
Stefana, you're nodding your head vigorously, and you can bring the corporate America slant to this question.
It's just because I like Megan, but that's besides what she's great. But I think one of the funny things is that, we talk about, there's a lot of negatives, right, in organizational structure. I work now for a 70,000 person company. We've got a lot of things happening. Somebody will find a bug, and that's what they call them internally, right? A bug, which is a CVE or just a vulnerability somewhere. And it will start a clock as soon as they log it. Right? The clock starts on the SLA. Everyone else feel this? Yes? Okay, so the clock starts. And then you want to yell at the person who started the clock because it's going to take longer than the 10 days, 2 days, whatever it is, depending on the contractual requirement, right? And we could all be stressed over the days. So I kind of have some solutions to that. And I don't want to say that this will happen everywhere, but it does require a bit of your work to collaborate, right, as an engineer. So one of the things that we did that was really well received, that at Salesforce we have something called a BISO. And don't ask me what it stands for, but basically they're the integrating partner between security and engineering for a specific team. They reside in the security team, but they hold the same goals as I do. So that really helps. I know that that's really corporate-y, but let me tell you, I came from startup, I'm now over here. I have a great relationship with my BISO. And one thing that we do is we kind of look at that list of CVEs and we go, hey, yeah, it's a list. Let's kind of reassess these risks based on our actual application. So we do that in a collaborative manner, right? It does take effort, though. It takes time. So that organizational structure challenge, we're trying to cut the time from when we get information to when we actually remediate by having a more collaborative model and not reporting it up to the powers that be constantly to hold us to an SLA. And I'm not saying that I'm skirting the SLA, because if I did say that, you would then report me to somebody. But basically, what I'm saying is I'm collaborating more tightly. One second thing, and I'm sorry I'm taking up more of my 2 minutes, but one second thing that we did successfully at Salesforce, which is kind of cool because, as you say, coming from a startup to a large company, usually you're complaining about the big structure, but they fund hacking events. So a hack reactor event where I shipped a few people from my team down to Australia for the hack reactor event where they hacked on 2 of our applications running on my infrastructure. And yes, they found problems. The fun part is my architect was sitting there, right? My DevOps architect was there. A few of the application engineers were there. They solved them right then and there, right? Tickets weren't logged. Just people got paid for finding the problems. That was a really cool way of doing it. I know this is not a end-all be-all solution, but it's a way of building that camaraderie between teams when you have a large organization to deal with.
I also think that part of this problem is that SLAs don't come from SLOs, which is the way it should be.
Not in security. Sorry. Not in security.
Exactly.
It comes from a contract.
Not in security. That's the point. It's like, but maybe that's the way it should be. But Constance, you have a view of what we can do, what else we can do.
Well, I was more going to say, like, the thing is that we need to align in the organizational structure, I think, is the decision-making power. Like, if I get, who has gotten an encrypted PDF back from a vendor who did a red teaming test, and then you got the results, and they're typically protected, and you were
Me?
Yeah.
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
a lot of people. Okay, so and then there's findings in there, right? And then there's typically one person who can accept the risk with the decision power, and then there's another set of people who could understand what those findings actually mean. And it's not, but there's always this little bit of shame attached to this report because there's stuff in there that you might not want, too many people to see. So having that awareness that it's different people that understand the findings and can take the risks is actually pretty crucial when you decide your organizational structure. Like, who actually gets that report so that they don't have to forward it too much. And I think that, when you decide how the org structure would be built, that'd be an important point.
Okay, this was all sad. I hope the Kleenex are done. We are going to end on a high note, I promise. Ladies, what brings you hope in all this darkness and seemingly hopeless situation that we're in? Constance?
Yeah, I think so now it's half a year after KubeCon London, and in London we had this kind of cool idea actually with the Kubescape team here, and also with the OCI team and the Pixie team, is like, what about we make this anomaly detection a lot easier? And I don't know why nobody else has come up with it before. And that the idea was like that we shift the creating of runtime profiles to the vendors and call it software bill of behavior. Basically saying like, hey, if I'm the vendor, why don't I provide a secure baseline of what this application should look like at runtime? That was what we talked about anomalies before. Because how am I going to keep my runtime rules up to date if I'm the consumer and I have actually no clue what's in that new release of whatever feature I'm installing or update or that I'm pulling. But how about we put that to the vendor and make these runtime profiles generalized and transferable so that I get a secure baseline by default? And then we have a filter to get those data volumes down. Meaning that could be eBPF, but it could also be normal OTel, basically having what network calls are being made, what libraries are being loaded, and is that something that the vendor anticipated that this thing does? Or is this object doing TCP or DNS connections to, I don't know where, sending that telemetry to, a type of squatter? And so that makes me hopeful, and also the uptake, the tremendous support that the ecosystem has given this idea over the last 6 months, that makes me very hopeful.
Thank you to the CNCF community for the idea of bill of behavior. Rotem, but we're short on time, so.
Yeah, I'll try to make it quick. I do feel that there is much more awareness of what's running on runtime, unlike, I don't know, last year even. Like just being here in the conference for 3 days, also the co-located, I feel that people that are talking to me are talking about runtime detection and not just about, checking what CVE do I have inside my cluster. And I know everyone are talking about 0 days. It's an ugly buzzword, but to be frank, it can happen, and we need to be secure because you're the one that got blamed if something like this will happen. So I do think that like having the awareness of what's running inside my cluster, how can I get bridge, maybe like the red alert team, or things like that, but having kind of application that detect that is one thing that makes me hopeful, probably. And I hope to continue with that.
Nice, thanks. Stefana?
So I can't believe I'm providing the corporate-y response here, but I'm going to do it. I'm actually kind of impressed that the industry is shifting investment into security at this high rate, especially with, I have to say AI, I'm on a panel, especially with AI, right? Thank you, I appreciate you. Compliance checked, okay. But basically, especially with AI, we need to be reallocating funds internally while building applications to security. And that has happened at my company, which is actually nice. I can say, hey, no new feature, we've got to fix this thing. So I'm able to reallocate resources a lot more readily than I did 10 years ago, which is nice to hear. So I've got positive in the big corporate environment. I know it's not real-time detection yet, but one day. We'll talk. Tomorrow, when I implement your thing.
We're doing a demo. Megan.
Okay, well, I'm also going to be extra tacky and say I am excited about AI. I'm going to take a positive outlook on the future of the world and not go into this dystopian where we have a force multiplier on AI threat actors and slop messing up our repos. But I think net it'll be maybe a positive technology, especially when you look at like the checkbox stuff and the backroom compliance activities that people hate doing. Like, just make the robots do it, and then we can free up humans to actually think about the hard, interesting problems. Like, make the bots do all of the boring stuff that we have to do, and let's like focus on the actual like interesting security problems.
Might be a
I don't want to take screenshots anymore. Can you do that for me, bot? Sorry, compliance.
Okay, we have 3 minutes left, so I think we can take maybe a question. If we're quick, we might be able to take
We have
two.
a runner. Oh, good.
Oh, wow.
This is exciting. They're all running out for drinks.
Hi, ladies. I cannot tell you how proud I am of this panel. In 25 years of corporate, is the first time I'm at a conference, I mean beyond CNCF, that I see a panel full of like complete women, and I'm here with a team of 3 women, right, participating from the OSCAL Compass CNCF Sandbox project. So if you don't know what OSCAL is the NIST standard for compliance as code. So we should talk afterwards. So my question is, you mentioned about the behaviors and runtime detection, and I think you are familiar with the Center for Internet Security, CIS, and all the benchmarks that the products are registering there, which is actually the type of weakness that we detect at runtime if something doesn't work. Do you see with what you mentioned here as runtime detection a need for something beyond that in terms of weakness detection? Is the CIS not enough, or it's not applied enough?
I'll answer that. So, as I said, Kubescape started as a compliance tool. With CIS compliance, we still have it, by the way, but CIS compliance and NSA compliance and MITRE compliant, and we did all the automatic testing, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, it doesn't check if an attacker is attacking in real time. I mean, it doesn't check for SQL injection. It doesn't check for exec to pods. It doesn't check for, I mean, I can say that I had a customer just yesterday that got attacked. And of course, he didn't see it in compliance because, you know, you're not just, you know, scanning for fun, right? You just don't do that. But you do see the alert in, I don't know, 10 p.m. at night or whatever it's been last night. So I just don't think that compliance is enough those days because you just don't have the full picture in when it does matter, because time is one big thing that you need to be aware of.
I have a hot take of, I think this is benchmarks are good, but they're about 20 years old in my mind. They're missing a ton of information, and sometimes when certain federal governments require me to meet certain benchmarks that are old, I'm sitting there trying to roll back my security posture to meet their government guidelines, right? I have a FedRAMP moderate environment. I have to meet their government guidelines. So I appreciate these benchmarks. They're a good baseline for everybody, but they're baseline. They're not the level of security that I should abide by to make sure my customers' data is secure.
Thank you.